Hey folks, the Broken Meeple kicking off with Season 4. You're going to notice some changes in the format. Most of them are a surprise. Just let me know what you think in the comments. But today, I'm taking a look at Trismegistus,
a hypertonic lion tamer.
That one was on purpose.
From BoardAndDice and Danielle Tassini. Yeah, I'm pretty certain the actual pronunciation is Trismegistus. But what is it with this guy and unpronounceable names? I mean, Teotihuacan, I don't even know if that's pronounced correctly. Trismegistus now. There's one coming out this year called, I think, Tekenu or something like that. And then we had Zolkin the Mayan calendar. I mean, seriously, what is it with you and strange names? I don't get it. But this is another very heavy game in his lineup, and certainly very heavy compared to what BoardAndDice normally stick out. In Trismegistus, you are a group of rival alchemists seeking to be the best that there's ever been. And to do so, you will transmute metals with different essences, you will perform experiments, you will build up your Philosopher's stone full of alchemical greatness, and essentially you are going through this very complex Eurogame, more on that later, where you are going to be taking actions using dice with different symbols on them, and the symbols and the colour of the dice are relevant to how you will perform actions in this game and to how powerful those actions can be. You have several different metals that you can work with, starting from very basic all the way up to the rarest of all, gold, that act as a wild. You have different experiments with different requirements and different rewards. You will also gain points for building up your Philosopher's Stone in the center of the board, which is a set of formulas that you may unlock that give you special bonuses during the game, but also to get you endgame points. And you can also fulfill the requirements of special objectives or publications in order to get even more points. So that is a very general overview of what you're doing in the game, but Trismegistus is very heavy, very complex, and has a lot to offer. So let's have a look at it in more detail. Starting with duration. The duration of this game usually will set you back a good 2 to 3 hours. This is not going to be a short game by any means. Even with solo mode, you're probably looking at a good solid 60 to 90 minutes playing this, if not just from rules checking, but just from how much thinking there is to do in this. When you sort of boil it down, there's not a huge amount of actions you're doing in the game, but you can take a while to do a round. I mean, there's only 3 rounds in the game, and yet we're talking 2 to 3 hours. It's a lengthy affair, particularly with 4 players, because you've got not only the idea that you can react in other players' turns, but it's just the amount of analysis paralysis that this game can create. People will be thinking on their turns, you've got to forward plan like crazy, and if you're not careful, then you do find that this game will set you back quite a long time. But it's not too long, and it outstays its welcome. Going into E for ease of play, this is where we start to encounter some problems. This rulebook is, it's far from perfect. Learning this game is a bit of a chore. The rulebook is not the worst that I've ever seen, but it's not laid out in a particularly nice fashion either. You start off with some basic concepts like setup, except the setup is on a different page to the actual bits that tell you what the setup is. So you have the diagram on a double page spread, but the explanations are on different pages. So you're constantly having to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in order to remember what it was you're supposed to be setting up. On top of that, it only goes into base detail about what you're doing in the round before you then have to look further in the book near the end for the actual proper meat of the game, which is the whole transmuting element and various other stuff besides. But even with the rulebook on it, without even thinking about the rulebook, this game is just very complex. There is a weight rating of this on Board Game Geek, and I know I'm not a huge fan of the board game statistics, but it's nearly 4.0 on Board Game Geek weight rating. I think it's something like 3.8, 3.9. That's heavy. Very heavy. This is a more complex Euro game to get to grips with and understand what it is you're doing than pretty much every Vital Lacerda game on my shelf. It is not for entry-level players. It is not for, even mid-weight gamers until they're used to heavy gamers. This really is a heavy gamers game, and it really needs to be stressed like crazy. There are some people out there who claim, oh yeah, this is easy enough to get into, it's not a problem. Yeah, there's a certain meme for that. Wrong! This is not one that I would want to put in front of anybody who is not used to a heavy game or even remotely prone to analysis paralysis, because this game can really generate that. And with the rulebook not being particularly useful during the game as an intuitive guide, you do find that your first couple of games are going to be a lot of rules checking in this. And it's not helped by the fact that you've got quite a lot of iconography to get through, but also the boards and what you're using aren't particularly intuitive as to what you're supposed to be doing on any particular action, and the reference cards that you get are frankly laughable. They are ridiculously useless. You know, some of them will tell you like iconography things that you already could figure out like there and then. You know, like the very easy stuff it puts on the reference card. It doesn't put any of the useful stuff on a reference card, no, but it puts the dirt easy stuff. What I highly recommend you do in this game, and what I've done, is you go on Board Game Geek and you get yourself some reference aids and you laminate them. I forget who did this one, but you should be able to find it easily enough. It's a really good reference aid. It essentially gives you all the summary rules on one side, all the useful iconography on the back, and I've basically just printed 4 of these and laminated them, and they're in the box. Believe me, it'll make your life a lot easier. Now, getting on to something a bit more positive for T, tactics and strategy. Whoa, yeah, this one. If you like heavy meaty games, this is gonna really tick your boxes, because it's not so much tactical. There's not a huge amount of tactics to employ here. You know, you might occasionally see a die that looks, oh yeah, that might be good, or a new experiment might come out onto the board and you think, well, you know what, I could switch to that. That might not be too bad. But really, this isn't about tactics. This is a very strategic game, though. You need to be really good at forward planning, otherwise you're in trouble. Because it's not enough just to think, well, this turn I kind of feel like doing some transmuting. I'll just spend some essences and move this cube over this line and go into there. No, you can't, because the die color dictates what transmuting you're allowed to do. The symbol dictates what essences and materials you can get, and what experiments you're allowed to pick from. And on top of that, nothing in this game is like I do this one action and then I get a bunch of points. It's really a case of, right, I need to do this experiment. It requires 2 of that, 1 of that, 1 of that, and 1 of that. Well, hang on, I'm going to need to transmute that into that. But that's fine, I can do that. But then I need a red die to transmute that into that unless I use this artifact, which gives me a wild transmute. But then I need more essences, so I need to spend an action doing that. Maybe if I grab one of those artifacts and stick it on the bottom of my board, that will give me a bonus. I could flip it back over on his turn.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Oh my god! It blows your brain with how many choices you have, how much you need to consider and think about on future turns. And that is not a bad thing at all. Because when I talked earlier about it being a 2 to 3 hour game, this one justifies the 2 to 3 hour limit, because you're constantly thinking, you are engaged all the way through, unless somebody with analysis paralysis is really, really taking their time. Because on top of that, you've also got the little reaction tokens that mitigate the solitaire experience a little bit by saying that on other people's turns, you can flip one of those over and do a very basic action. It's not the most interactive part of it when you've only got 2 of them, but there is ways in the game for some players to actually get more of them. And even then, they're very useful not to be underestimated, because sometimes that might be, oh, wait a minute, you've got a die that's red. If I use that, I can get that essence I really want. Right, on your turn, I'm going to react. And you can do a lot of this simultaneously, but I recommend you take it a little bit slower in your first game, because you really need to get these rules down. But the strategic element of this, it's going to blow your brain. Your brain is going to hurt by the end of this game. It really is going to test the brain cells, but in a really, really good way. So on to A for aesthetics. The aesthetics are actually reasonably good from a artwork perspective. The boards look decent. It looks like an alchemical board. You've got your little board in front of you that's double layered and, you know, recessed in that, well, not recessed, but it's double layered with openings on the side so you can slot the artifacts in, and it looks like a laboratory board. I would have liked there to have been some graphic design to help with the iconography and maybe illustrate some, some kind of like how to do certain actions. You really do need to get your player aids or be very proficient with this rulebook in order to stand a chance. But, the artwork is fine. It's nothing to write home about. We're not talking gorgeous pictures of, wizards doing potion making or anything. It's just, here's a potion, it's got some color, and that's all well and good. Components wise though, it's a bit more hit and miss. The cards are fine. I do like the double boards, but I wish that there was something better than just simply a single color cube to represent all the different materials, and also the fact that a lot of the other stuff you can get is just basically a basic cardboard token. It really isn't necessarily anything to sing home about, but I wouldn't say they were bad either. Really, the issues are more down to the graphic design, where I wish it was a little bit more user-friendly with trying to do everything on the board. Although there are some aspects that I really don't get. I mean, I'll try and get it out of the box for you so I can show, but I really don't understand this. there is on the top of your board, there is these 4 segments here, right? Okay, and this is based on the experiments. So when you get a particular experiment, earth, air, fire, that kind of thing, you place it on top of this board, you unlock a formula from there, and it goes in your Philosopher's Stone in here. That's all well and good. But the colors up here don't match what the experiment cards are. What? It's like, you know, you look at, it tells you in the book, like, oh, when you do an experiment, put it on the top of the respective column and then unlock the formula in that. And it's like, well, hang on, which column is the respective one? Perhaps if I know that. You know, there are some of them that are a bit more obvious, like there's a slightly reddy one that you think, oh, that's probably fire. And there's a blue one, that's probably water. But in nowhere in the book does it highlight air is yellow. And earth, you just have to assume is the green. The example in the book puts it under, like, air under yellow, but it doesn't say this is the air column, this is the fire column or anything. It doesn't say if you can pick and choose, it doesn't say if it's fixed. It's literally, the book is full of elements like that, where you're just kind of expected to know this kind of stuff. It really needed to have been written better, and as such, this has one of the highest barriers to entry I've ever seen for a heavy Euro game. But aside from the graphic design issues, for the most part, it's a pretty good affair. And then Immersion of theme. Immersion, you're pretty good with this actually. This isn't one that you're going to play strictly for the theme, but you do feel like you are transmuting different metals, trying to get from point A to point D by the time you've gone through all the motions. You are preparing potions and experiments. You don't get any funky effects per se. You just score points, maybe get some extra tokens or extra materials and that. But it does feel like you are effectively running a lab and trying to use all these different materials and essences to your advantage. And as you're creating combos from, oh, if I do this, then it allows me to perform this experiment, which then allows me to get these materials and transmute them over there. It really does give that impression that you are just literally throwing everything in the kitchen sink into your experiments and coming up with something good, whether it's gold, victory points, or the like. So the theme is not one that you're going to be going, oh, it's dripping with it here. But it is definitely well represented and definitely isn't a dry affair. I would certainly put this higher in more of the thematic categories than most, even if it has to abstract it down a little bit for being a heavy Euro. And then finally, longevity. With longevity, replay value, here's where it's still hit and miss. The experiments are not the most varied experiments in the world, and the publications tend to repeat themselves a lot. You know, you get like, oh, points for you going up these 2 particular tracks and points for going up these 2 particular tracks, but they do repeat themselves quite a bit. There is a solo mode, however, and the solo mode is actually a pretty good learning tool. You have to do very little with the AI character, and instead you can just use that as a way to learn the rules of the game and get more used to it. One slight downside, however, is that the solo mode is ridiculously easy. I mean, literally, my second game of this I played, I thought, let's go for the solo mode, got more handy with the rules, and I demolished it by like 170 points to about 70 on the standard difficulty. It gives you about 101 different ways to tweak the difficulty. I mean, why? Why couldn't you have made the solo mode, like, fairly concrete and then maybe 1 or 2 variants? It just feels like the solo mode's very much like, here's the template, and now just basically do what you like with it. But you can make it harder, you can make it easier, and I'm certainly going to, you know, I did tweak the difficulty settings to make it harder, and I still won, but it felt like more of a challenge. It felt like the computer had more of a chance to catch me up. But on its standard mode though, use it as a rules fix. You know, use it as a way to learn the rules better and just accept that you're going to demolish the AI because there's very little chance it should beat you. But with the rest of the multiplayer game, there's only so much variety in it. It's more the fact that because you're thinking so much about what you're doing, and because there are different paths to victory you can follow, whether it's like going mad on Philosopher's Stone, doing a ton of experiments, focusing on one element, one particular publication, there is a decent amount of replay value you will get out of this game, because it's not like you're going to play it like one after the others, or even one after the next day, because your brain will be so burnt out you won't be able to play it that regularly. But this one should last a good while on your shelf. So my final word on Trismegistus is that it's a solid, complex, heavy strategic Euro game that will test the brain cells of even the most seasoned of gamers amongst us. However, there is the caveat that it has a high learning curve and will require some initial process of learning the mechanics and rule set and potentially some additional aids on top. It is definitely one that you should check out though if you're into heavy Euro games and you want that little bit more theme attached to them. For me, I'm giving this a solid 8 out of 10 and a seal of endorsement. So if you want this kind of thing, then by all means check out Trismegistus, or however you're going to pronounce it in the future, from BoardAndDice. Just accept, might take you a little bit of time to get used to it. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, and regardless of whether you've blown up my lab from your failed experiments or created the nugget of purest green...
Indeed you do, Percy, except of course it's not really a nugget, is it? It's more of a splat.
It's still only a game. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video.